This carving started off as 4 blocks of lime wood all glued together. I didn't really know the best way to do it, but I did know I wanted the grain orientated so it was going horizontally, basically, because that is the length of the horse, so that just seemed to me the right way to do it. I did leave the horn out at the start because I just didn't want a chance breaking that off while carving, which has happened to me several times before. Right now I'm just using a Ryoba saw, and I was just showing the chat on Twitch how I was going to break it. You can see how I've sawed down and then used the weakness of the grain to break that block off there, and I was just demonstrating to them the way that I'm going to do it to try and clear the waste off as quickly as possible using hand tools. I'm sure it would be a lot faster if I had a chainsaw or something like that. Now I'm just using one of my favourite chisels, which is a spoon gouge, a fishtail gouge I guess you would call it, and that helps me clear material away pretty quickly, scooping it out. And now using a kind of bent flat chisel, or it might be a gouge with a really low angle sweep if you look at it there, but it's really helpful because it has curved corners so it doesn't leave tracks on the wood when you carve stuff off. It's really good for clearing out areas. I'm just using the same chisel here to take away the jawline of the horse and then clearing out the back. And now back to the fishtail gouge again. I chose this fire eye angle because I just thought it would show you just how much material I had to take away. I was being really conservative with the material. That's the good thing about having a clay model, which I had before this. It let me work out how much material was enough and then add a little bit on. So the bits of wood that I glued together I knew would give me enough room to make a carving in there, but also knew that it wouldn't be such a ridiculous amount of wood that it would take forever to clean the excess away, and also that means less wastage on wood, you know. So I've planned out where bits of the legs are there, and this way I'm cleaning out one part of the leg that's on the opposite side, and the black line there I'm leaving that leg on this side because I know that's where it's going to be. And now you can see I just added a little picture there so you can see where I've been using the clay model. So basically it hasn't turned out exactly the same way as the clay model, but because I made the model I was able to get the pose the way I wanted it and recreate that in the carving, and also a lot of the proportions and everything I was able to get right because of the clay model that I made, which I think would have been a lot harder without it. So even though it takes a little while to build the clay models sometimes, the horse one probably took maybe around 10 hours to make. Even though it takes that bit of extra time, I think it's worth it in the end because you have a reference model right there in front of you to measure from to help you with some of the really difficult decisions. And there are lots of difficult decisions in wood carving, and proportion, getting the right proportion and getting a pose the way you want it are two really difficult things. So figuring them out in clay in the first place I think is a good way to go at it. Of course the other way to go at it is just to keep carving, and eventually your brain will probably just get used to what poses are good, or do some studying on what the old masters used to do, Michelangelo and all that, and test the golden ratio and all this kind of business. But I just think the clay sculpture helps a lot, and also it's a lot of fun. Sculpting the clay was a really interesting thing for me, and I've kept doing it now. So now I've got the basic shape of the horse. What I will have been doing throughout this whole thing that you're seeing here is using my calipers to measure the clay model I've got, and then taking away bit by bit. We've got the rough shape now, so now I'm working on things like muscles and bones and things like that, and you can see the hooves there I'm working on as well, all with that nice little chisel with the curved ends again. I did use a drill a few times, and the reason I'm using a power drill is just because I felt like it, because it's faster and in a way it allows me to be more accurate. When you're using like a bit and brace or an egg beater drill, as some people call it, you wobble a bit, you wobble around a bit. Obviously the problem with using a power drill for this sort of thing is that you have to go slowly sometimes because sometimes you're just going to fly through the other end of the wood that you're drilling through, and you got to watch out you don't, you know, push into anything or split a piece off you didn't want to split off. So especially when the carving starts getting more delicate, like this stage right now, we're getting to bits that are starting to get a bit more delicate. Though we have a connection there, you know, we have the hoof connected to the front, and then obviously the other end of the leg connected to the body. So that's still fairly strong there, but there are bits on there that could easily chip off if you weren't paying attention. And I left the bottom of the unicorn, the big piece underneath, I left that as a block because I knew I wanted to have something there supporting the body, but I didn't know what. Because the problem with the pose that I've picked here is that it's only the back legs supporting it. If you took away everything on this carving that wasn't a unicorn and just had the ground, it would just be the two back legs supporting the whole horse, and not just the two back legs, but the only contact between the horse and the ground would be the bottom of its hooves. So I think you can imagine with the grain orientated in that way, especially the way it was horizontally, if just a slight tap on the front of the head were to happen, then that would break easily. So for that reason, I studied some things online and I looked for different designs on what to do at the bottom, but you'll see more on that later. Here I'm just working out the back of the nostril, and I just used the gouge there to go round the back of the nostril, and then the same gouge again to chip out the piece so that the nostril kind of stuck out. And now we're doing the actual nostril piece with a smaller gouge. And now the eye with another gouge. This is why it's handy to have, you know, 3 or 4 different gouge sizes, or even more than that really. I have about 3 or 4 different sizes. But I'm sure that if I had 10, 20 different sizes of gouges, I would be happy. So even though the eye ball is round, I've gone round it with a gouge, but I'm actually making it round with a flat chisel, because you can just use a central point as a reference and then cut downwards from there so that the central point is a bit that's sticking out the furthest, you know, like a sphere basically. And here you can see the bottom a bit more, where I've started to work it away a little bit, but at this point I still haven't figured out what I want to do with the bottom. I'm just cutting the mane away from the neck there to make it look a bit more like it flows, using a gouge rather than a V-chisel, so it kind of flows in a bit more. At this point I think did call for a V-chisel, because we're talking about hair here, so we needed some deep cuts to show the flow and how the hair is separate from other bits of hair. Hair is actually something I'm still trying to figure out, but on the horse, or sorry, on the unicorn here, I think I did a fairly good job of it. So I'm pretty pleased with the hair on this one. Now I'm just starting to work on that back leg on, I'm going to say the front side, because this is the side that I probably carved the most. And then the bottom hoof, or the back hoof on the front side. The hooves are kind of weird, and the feet anatomy is really strange when you keep looking at it for so long, trying to work out all the different little shapes and everything. And this is just another way that I was clearing out material, so drilling again, but because it's behind that leg, I could have chiseled through there, but drilling through there, because I know the path is clear pretty much all the way through there, I was able to chisel out. You can see I've created a nice space behind there, so that was just all gouged out of there after drilling through a few times. Then you just get the gouge and gouge it all out, and because the drill has gone through there and those big holes are in there, it allows some space for the bits of wood to break into, so that it's easier to clear that section out. And sometimes, you know, you need all the help you can get with these sort of things, because with a chisel, you know, it's doable, but it just takes a while sometimes. Now I'm clearing out the space between the tail and the body. The tail I went for a kind of almost like a lion's tail, because I modelled this unicorn a little bit on The Last Unicorn, if any of you have seen that. It's a great movie, animated movie from the 80s. And the reason I'm using that as a reference is because this unicorn's for my sister, and she loves that movie. So I'm using a different kind of tail. It's kind of like a lion's tail or an elephant's tail, and it just has a slightly different touch about it. And this is another way I'm doing using the grain to my advantage. So you cut down with a saw against the grain, so, you know, horizontal to the grain, and then you can get a gouge at the back and just chip it out, and it's just a great way to clear wood out quickly, you know. I added those little, you see the little ribs there that I added on the sort of chest of the horse there. I wanted those to be a bit less pronounced, so I came back a bit later with a chisel and sort of cut them back a little bit. I do have some scraping tools, but they didn't quite work on that just because there were too many bumps. So I came back with that with a sort of gouge or a really flat chisel so that I could just smooth them off there and get them out of the way a little bit. Because I think I was looking at an anatomical model at that point, more of a musculature kind of drawing of a horse. So it led to me putting those in there but making them over-pronounced. So my plan was to go back and clear those up afterwards, which I did. And now I'm drilling out below this other leg as well, just to clear some material out. And then I scooped that all out with the chisel. And at this point I started to figure out how I wanted the bottom of the unicorn to look. Here's one of the scrapers that I've used in another video, you've seen me use it. I'm just using this to smooth out the surfaces a little bit and making those muscles look like they don't stick out too much. You know, I wanted them to be a bit more subtle. And in the end, you can see I've cleared up the rib part there as well. In the end, I did like how the unicorn turned out, but I think that those marks could have been a little bit more subtle still. But here I'm using the scraper just to, you can see how it's taking away some of those chisel lines and kind of making it blend in a bit. Same with here on the face, you can see some of those deeper lines disappearing a little bit as I take the top surface down. This is a good reason to always have a knife handy. This is just a Mora knife, so it costs about £25, but you know, sometimes there's a little space like that you just can't get to, and so it's always nice to have. I think it's good to have as many hand tools handy as possible when you're carving, because so many of them come into use. You've got chisels, files, spoke shave, draw knife, drills like we saw earlier, coping saw. You know, there's so many little tools that can just be used when it comes to carving stuff. Even something like this, you know. And I'm just using another little gouge to gouge out the ears, the inside part of the ears. And I did make those ears thinner as well at the end. You'll see at the end of the video how different they look. Then it was on to making the horns. So this bit I was quite worried about, because obviously I had to drill a hole in the unicorn's head before putting the horn in there. So I started trimming this piece of lime that was cut off from another part of the sculpture. So this was like a piece that was sort of a scrap, I guess. And now I'm using the Mora knife again just to make that twirly section, because I quite like the thought of that, having a unicorn horn with the sort of swirl going on in it. But this is not really a natural looking swirl as such, but maybe more of a, I don't know, just a different kind of swirl. It's how now I'm drilling into the head, and this is one of the hardest things to do. Like I said, I spent a while figuring out where on the unicorn's head the horn usually goes, and I figured it out in the end. So now I'm pushing it in, and this is where I start panicking, because oh no, it's not turning in. So I tighten up the wood screw underneath of it, and finally I managed to push it in with some force. So that was a bit of a worrying moment, but as you can see, it turned out okay in the end. So now here's where I've figured out the shape of the underneath. You can see what is happening there. It's supporting the body in the centre, and it's connected to the front two legs. So that leg, the front left leg, is connected on its side, and the front right leg is connected on the bottom of the hoof. And so what I'm doing there is just drilling out the front, and you can see my Twitch stream in the background on the top left. So that's what people were seeing on stream. And I'm now cleaning this out, drilling through there, and then I got some chisels and shaped it back. I got my knife and cleaned it all up, and then I did the same with the chisels and the knives over the rest of the bottom piece as well, which is like this nice curve. You can see I've got that nice curve now. Now we're getting out the coping saw again, and this is one of the great things about this setup. All I have to do is cut this piece off here, then I wanted to cut another corner off. So all I've got to do is unscrew the wood screw, then I can turn the unicorn around, I can only turn it one way because the back is hitting the back, as you can see there. So I can turn the unicorn around, get it back into position I want, and then before you know it, I've tightened up the wing nut at the bottom and it's tight in place again, ready for me to do another cut. So that is the power of using the woodcarver screw. The screw is actually going up into the bottom of the whole unicorn sculpture there. It's actually going right up into the bottom of it. So you can't actually see it, but you just have to imagine that it's going through that shelf and into the bottom of the kind of sculptural carved piece underneath the unicorn. So this is when I was just finishing off the base, just trimming this down bit by bit. And then this is a thing I always find fascinating, when you cut across the grain and it's all white looking, and then you suddenly get a sharp chisel and cut again and you get this really nice burnished effect, and it's crazy. I mean, look at it, it's like colouring in the wood. It's really weird, but very interesting. I really loved seeing that. And now I'm just putting in my maker's mark and the date. After I'm putting it into an oak base with a maker's mark because I glued the finished unicorn onto a piece of oak. And now I'm just painting it with linseed oil. What I normally do, especially with lime wood, is just completely, for the first coat, just completely soak the sculpture, just totally and utterly soak it. So I'm using a lot of oil here. And then at the end, what I'll do is I'll wipe it all down, and then I'll wait maybe a day or two, or you could even, I don't know, wait like half an hour, and cover it again, but with a thinner layer. But what I did here was just to totally submerge it pretty much, and then wipe it off afterwards. I do that with pretty much every sculpture that's oiled, at least. I didn't use the polyurethane and paint technique this time. I just went for linseed oil, but I think it came up really, really well. It shows off those muscles nicely. It shows off the grain in the bottom sculptural piece, and of course the grain in the oak. I mean, you can't go wrong with linseed oil and oak. Such a great combination. And there it's just painting the tail. And you can see it's almost already changing the colour of the lime, but you've really got to chuck the oil into lime because it soaks it up so fast. So the reason I chose a unicorn for this carving was to kind of have a comparison to one that I did in 2017. Hopefully you can tell between these two which one the new one is, but just in case you don't know, this is the new one, and this is the one I made in 2017. This one's made of sycamore, this one's made of lime, so straight away that helps because sycamore is very hard. It's just like maple basically, so it's very hard wood. And also with this one, you saw in the video that I had a clay model to work with, right? I was taking measurements from the clay model, and that helped so much, just being able to have a reference model right there in front of me to get all these measurements and everything. And whilst this doesn't look exactly like the reference model, a lot of the proportion and everything and the pose is taken from the reference model. So although you spend extra time making the clay model, sometimes it's worth it. I've found so far that it has been worth it, so that's why we made the Anglo-Saxon guy, and that's going to be the next big kind of figure carving. It worked with the unicorn as well. So thanks a lot for watching that video. I hope you enjoy all the glamour shots and close-up shots that are happening right now. This is actually for my sister. So it's going to be going to her house along with this one, which she kindly let me borrow for this video and for my Twitch streams, just so I could show people what the difference was between the two. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and maybe I'll catch you again next time.